Welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about Community Report 64 for Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. This was released on the 12th of December 2022. Now, this report concentrates completely on the new waste management mechanic, which will be included in the next update. And before we get started, as we go down, I'm going to talk about some of the pictures that are in this report and my interpretation of what I'm seeing. Now, what I want to emphasize is that I've got no contact with the devs, so the conclusions I'll be drawing from those pictures is purely what I think it's going to be. If any of you see something else that I've missed, feel free to chuck it in the comments and we'll discuss it. So let's just get straight into it. It says, "Greetings, dear comrades of the Soviet Republic. While the world is putting its foot on the gas in the preparation for the upcoming Christmas season and the weather is getting colder, we are bringing you some fresh information about the next update for the game. We'd like to release the update in the first quarter next year. In the past, we hoped we can release the game fully at that time, but the features that we want to add require much more time and attention, thus it takes longer to get them into the game. Despite all that, you can enjoy the game as it is in early access stage, and recently the Metro update was fully released to all players." Yes, I agree with that sentiment of the devs, is that they, in the last updates, they've introduced some very complicated mechanics, which some of them appear simple on the surface, but the structure of this game is now at a point that even like with the introduction of Metro, it changes the game dynamic completely. So I can really understand why the devs are taking their time over this, because the last thing we want them to do is mess up everything else. Anyway, we've got a nice picture of what we would call here in the UK a skip lorry. So moving down to the next paragraph. So what do we have for you today? This report will be again about garbage, and hopefully it will give you a better insight into the core mechanics. In the first picture, you can see our brand new additions to the game. Vehicle park, a garbage truck with large containers and a large container stand. There will be two types of container, ones small ones which will be used mainly for residential areas, and large ones which will be used for industrial purposes. The garbage loading speed will depend on sending the right truck to the right place, as there will be buildings which will handle small containers, large containers, and some garbage dumping sites with waste lying on the ground. Now that paragraph is interesting because I'll see if I can find it. Yes, it will depend on sending the right truck to the right place. To me, that implies that we're going to get a certain level of control over the waste management pickup system. Now, whether that's going to be defined in the technical office, so like you build a technical office and it's got skip lorries in it or garbage trucks, and or maybe there'd be an extra parameter to say which one will pick up there, or the alternative is we may have some control using distribution offices, but that's pure speculation. So we'll just take a quick look at the picture. As I've already mentioned, this is what we in the UK would call a skip lorry, because on the back is a skip with the two uprights which load and unload, and in the background here we've obviously got a skip pickup point next to what looks like some grass. So I'm assuming that's nearby is some industry or something. Now the pickup process could be very interesting, because I'm hoping that these pickup points may have a factory connection to, say, a large steel plant, or some form of connection is probably the best way of saying it, because it could make picking up the waste a little bit more tricky. I mean, of course, the alternative is that it will work like water or sewage, that you'll put one of these in next to some industries, and then the waste will be dropped into these scrap bins, which could then be picked up by the lorries. Anyway, that's pure speculation. I'm just going to go down and read the paragraph below this picture first. There's in this picture we can see that our new waste separation plant, which will separate waste into different waste types: plastic waste, metal scrap, aluminium scrap, construction waste, and other waste. This will act universally for all kinds of waste separation, but we have also more effective specialized separation plants for each type of waste, which means that they will separate only one type of waste from the rest, which will be useful in dealing with the waste from certain facilities where one type is of higher value of waste prevails. So take a quick look at this. So I would say that this is a general recycling plant where the domestic and industrial waste will be brought and then be sorted into different types. So you've got the skip lorry unloading here, and then you've got a nice row of skips there, which I suppose would represent the storage. And then in here, the waste would be split into different categories. Now, on this corner here is a bit of a hint of a road, either a road connection or a factory connection. Because of course, if you've got this, it's going to need separate storage areas, but of course we've got no breakdown of that at the moment. So that's quite interesting, actually. I quite like that layout. I mean, in some ways, this building could be a waste version of the water pickup and unloading buildings that we have for, well, for sewage and water. So that might be an equivalent that the garbage or the trucks would go there, drop off the waste, and then it would be further moved on by another mechanism. So let's just read the next short paragraph, because I think this paragraph relates to both these two pictures. So it says, then we have new recycling plants for plastic and gravel. The first one processing plastic waste into usable plastics, and the other construction waste into gravel. We are planning to add plants which will change metal scraps into steel and aluminium. So I think the top one is the gravel and plastic. Now the plastic reprocessing plant is on the right here, and you can just see what I'd say is the gravel processing plant in the background there. So let's just look at the plastic processing plant at the moment. So what you're going to get is 10 tons of plastic waste, which will be turned into 2 tons of plastics. And so if you imagine that the previous building sorts out the plastic waste, and then that is then sent to this for recycling, which will give us the plastic, and then the plastic waste, and then down here we got mixed waste, 0.5 tons of storage. So what this is implying is that this recycling plant won't be a pure conversion. So you won't get, so 10 tons of plastic waste won't be converted completely into 2 tons of plastics. There'll be a little bit of mixed waste left over, which will then have to be disposed. And that also applies to the gravel processing plant here. So 90 tons of construction waste will then be turned into gravel. Now, so it looks like construction waste may only be turned into gravel, but then we've got 0.5 tons of mixed waste coming out the bottom. So I just wonder whether the mixed waste can be further processed, because this is specialized waste. And this is where I think I'm going to speculate a little bit. And down here, now we got mixed waste. And then that can be turned, so 98% specialization efficiency is 98% metal scrap, which consumed at max. So what we're saying is that 30 tons of mixed waste could be turned into 98% scrap metal. But scrap metal isn't steel or anything like that. So would that have to be further processed? Also, it's quite interesting. It says big garbage container export below, but we can't see that bit. And then the aluminium processing would be exactly the same. So we get 97% efficiency of aluminium. So this is kind of implying that we may have an option of using feeding mixed waste into a certain specific type of plant, especially if you're getting aluminium scrap or metal scrap. So there's a possibility of an option here for turning them into something specific. And then of course we've got the big, so again, I'm going to try and resist the temptation to speculate too much. So what you'd have to do is, so we'd get the metal scrap and the aluminium scrap, which I presume it will be an aggregate based on these buildings, because they both feed into there. So the mixed waste to be brought in, processed into one of those specialized type forms of scrap. And then what we got down here, it says, in addition that these have functional incinerators which act as power plant and other as heating plant, with heating values depending on the waste that you bring in, which was mentioned in one of the previous reports. But all of this will not be available if you will not have the research turned off, because most of the facilities of the waste processing will be locked by research. And they'll be much more locked and unlocked by research, which we can write about in upcoming reports. This is confirmation that research will be a big aspect of waste management. Now, for anyone who's not familiar with the game difficulties, is you can almost guarantee that there will be a setting that says you want a simple waste management. And if you select that, and as they hinted here, the research will be switched off. What that means is that the higher levels of processing, which they're talking about in here, will not be available. So to build up these more complex model, you're going to have play on the harder mode, or the highest level mode, with the research switched on and ready to go. Anyway, let's just take a quick look at the incinerator. We're importing mixed waste. We're burning 60 tons of mixed waste to produce power, but we're also getting mixed waste out. So you could get the possibility of a circular process, but I'm assuming that most of that 60 tons would be burnt, so you'd only get a very small amount out. And that also applies to the incinerator. You're bringing in mixed waste and you're burning 37 tons, and then you're exporting a little bit of mixed waste at the bottom. I think there's a possible exploit there. I think the devs may need to think about a form of specialized waste, like what would you call it, ash waste, or some waste that's got no value and can't be processed any further. Otherwise, I can see somebody using that as an exploit, although you'd need a lot of waste. And again, this is going to be one of the risks with having a incinerator power plant or heating plant. You're going to need a lot of mixed waste coming out from different sources. So this is only something that you would put near a big city or a heavy industry, because if you're not getting enough mixed waste, then you're going to have a bit of a problem. And this is one of the issues with this game, is that everything is dependent on something else. So if you're building a heating plant and you don't have a reliable supply of mixed waste, and then you get in the winter and that runs out, so your heating plant shuts down, then your population get cold, they get upset, they get unhappy, and they leave. So this has moved down to the final paragraph. You can see there is an immense potential for different builds and some logistical challenges with garbage collection update. One thing we are dealing with was waste out of some facilities like the steel mill, which processes a lot of resources each day. So we needed to find some balance as each day it can process 200 tons of iron and 375 tons of coal, with 42 tons of steel as output. So where will the remaining 533 tons of mass go each day? That can be a lot of pollution, a lot of waste for process. And there's only one of the challenges of on our side, because we want to make the waste processing manageable with a logistics standpoint and fun to play. Yeah, I can understand their point of view, but I mean, iron smelting is incredibly destructive, so I think a lot of it could be lost in pollution. Because I mean, if you're smelting coal, what you're really getting out is slag, and well, it's just mainly slag, isn't it, from a steel mill. So I think they will need to generalize a little bit, but and they will need to come up with say realistic forms of waste. Otherwise, I mean, if it is unbalanced, imagine trying to get rid of 533 tons of mass each day. Well, no, it's not really going to work, is it? Anyway, so just to move down to the final paragraph, it says, if we would keep the 2-week cycle for the reports for the next week, would have to come out during Christmas weekend. It may be better just to delay the next report and skip the holiday week and release it during the first week of the year 2023 instead. This way we can avoid doing things in a hurry whilst dealing with holiday related things. I hope we can wait a bit longer in this case. Until then, enjoy the time you spend with others, have fun, and stay tuned for the next report. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year in advance. Very interesting report. I'm really excited to get down more and more into the mechanics, and this recycling process is going to be very interesting to see how it all works, especially as the fact that you've got what appears to be these cycles of separating out the separate rubbish and what was it again? Was it they keep calling it mixed waste? I think mixed waste is going to be one of the big key components of this system, and managing it could be difficult. In fact, I would go as far as saying is that mixed waste will probably be the output if you're playing on a simple mode where you're not going to recycling. Anyway, guys, this is where I'm going to leave it. Hope you enjoyed this short video. Any opinions, feel free to chuck it in the comments or wherever chat. But until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.